Today's hearing was one of those moments that cuts right through Washington's noise and gets to the heart of what so many Americans are asking: who exactly is government working for? Representative Lauren Underwood of Illinois put that question front and center, confronting Admiral Fagan about a stunning revelation: a $50 million Gulfstream jet added to the Coast Guard budget, not for operations or rescues, but reportedly for the personal travel of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
Admiral, thank you for being here today. We know the Coast Guard does an incredible job with what you have, but also remains chronically under-resourced. The Coast Guard does life-saving work to respond to maritime disasters, combat the flow of illegal drugs, counter China, and prevent cyber attacks. I strongly support large increases to your budget, probably even larger than you've requested in some areas. But I'm concerned that this administration's political goals are shifting those limited resources away from strategic theaters where bad actors are aggressively testing American resolve. In your written testimony, you stated that the Coast Guard is, quote, surging operational forces to the U.S.-Mexico border and the Gulf of Mexico. So my question for you is, where specifically are those forces and resources to support them coming from? What theaters and missions were they assigned to before this surge? How many deportation flights has the Coast Guard flown? And why is that the best use of the aviation assets?
Ranking Member Underwood, thanks for your questions and your support. First, to answer your question about the alien expulsion operation flights, to date, since 20 January, the Coast Guard has flown 157 of those flights in support of other Department of Homeland Security components for southern border security operations. As to the other operations where we have surged assets to the southern border, and for us, the southern border also includes the border approaching Florida and our territories in the Caribbean. That's part of the southern border for us as well. And so we took planned operations from some other areas and in consultation, principally supporting combatant commanders. I consulted with those combatant commanders and the Department of Defense and briefed the Secretary on my plans to temporarily change some of those planned deployments. Now, this type of decision is not unprecedented, and we make those tough trade-offs all the time because there's an increasing demand for Coast Guard resources and always a limited number of cutters, boats, aircraft, and crews to provide them. And so that's part of the risk decision that I make in consultation with our area commanders.
Have any personnel, vessels, air assets, or other resources been pulled from the Coast Guard's Arctic strategy to accommodate the southern border surge?
No, Ranking Member Underwood, they have not.
What about your Indo-Pacific mission? Did you reduce lift capacity in the region in favor of more deportation flights here? And are we going to be slower in building our presence there as a result of the surge?
Ranking Member Underwood, there were 2 operational deployments that I directed be changed through that process I described before. And I want to be specific about that. One was a planned patrol working for Indo-Pacific Command, one of our national security cutters, and I consulted with Admiral Paparo about that before making that change. But there's been no change in our permanent presence in the Indo-Pacific. The other change in the Atlantic, you asked about the Arctic. We had the cutter Calhoun, another national security cutter that was scheduled to support a port visit for a senior leader meeting of the Arctic Coast Guard Forum in Iceland, and we canceled that planned meeting. It wasn't an operational meeting, and so that was related to the Arctic, but I wanted to be specific and clear in my answer.
And what about the Great Lakes, where the Coast Guard plays a critical role in commerce and safety for the community I represent? Has there been any change to the staffing plans for the Great Lakes region?
There have not been changes to that staffing plan. Our presence in the Great Lakes remain as important as always, which includes our domestic ice-breaking presence there.
Excellent. In your testimony, you also wrote that you are tripling the number of forward deployed air and surface assets at the southern border and simultaneously seeking total operational control of the region. It's clear strategic trade-offs are being made, and I'm concerned about the impact on your other missions. The Coast Guard desperately needs more funding to meet its mission, and the passage of a reconciliation bill is far from guaranteed at this time. And Coasties, like most Americans, are struggling with the rising cost of living. I speak frequently with young guardsmen and women who struggle to afford housing and access medical care, which is why I was horrified last Friday when we received a last-minute addition to your spend plan for fiscal 25, a new $50 million Gulfstream 5 for Secretary Noem's personal travel coming from the Coast Guard budget. She already has a Gulfstream 5, by the way. This is a new one. And so, Admiral, I have just one question for you here. Have you received any outreach, requests, or any other communication from anyone above you at DHS or any political appointee in the Trump administration regarding a new plane for the Secretary?
Ranking Member Underwood, so first of all, thank you for the support of the committee and the continuing resolution for 25. And as part of that spend plan to address the needs of our service members and their families, we're able to provide that cover the pay raise for military and civilian personnel, including a targeted pay raise for our junior enlisted personnel, which was essential. You had asked about the military command and control aircraft. So first of all, meeting the needs of our Coast Guard men and women that are doing frontline operations is my top operational priority, and it's a top operational priority of the Secretary. She's been clear with that to me, and I know she testified to that effect before the subcommittee last week. The Coast Guard, like the other military services, operates 2 military long-range command and control aircraft. This is part of our military operational fleet of aircraft. These are C-37 variants. The older one is a C-37 Alpha variant. And like a lot of the rest of our operational aviation fleet and our cutters and our boats and our shore facilities, it's old and it's approaching obsolescence and the end of its service life. The avionics are increasingly obsolete. The communications are increasingly unreliable, and it's in need of recapitalization like much of the rest of the fleet. But this aircraft is necessary to provide the Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, me as the Acting Commandant, the Acting Vice, and our 2 area commanders with secure, reliable, on-demand communications and movement to go forward, visit our operating forces conducting the missions, and then come back here to Washington to make sure we can work together to get them what they need.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I just want to note that I didn't hear the Admiral answer the question about whether he was directed to purchase this new Gulfstream 5, and I just want to note that as I conclude my time. Thank you. I yield back.
What we just witnessed in that hearing wasn't just about a piece of equipment or a budget adjustment. It was about power, transparency, and how easily public trust can be stretched thin when those in leadership forget who they serve. Representative Lauren Underwood's questioning of Admiral Fagan cut through layers of bureaucratic language and polite evasion to reveal something that should deeply concern every American taxpayer, a $50 million Gulfstream jet tucked into the Coast Guard's budget. And not for missions, not for life-saving work, not for drug interdictions or disaster relief, but reportedly for the personal travel of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Now, to understand why this matters, you need to appreciate what the Coast Guard actually faces every day. This is one of the smallest yet most overworked branches of our armed services. They patrol our borders, rescue people from storms, intercept drug smugglers, counter foreign interference, and support national defense, all with aging ships, outdated aircraft, and shrinking budgets. Many of these men and women serve long hours at sea for modest pay. Some of their families are struggling with the rising cost of living. So when a new $50 million luxury jet suddenly appears in their budget, it raises an obvious question. How does this help them? What mission does that serve? Because when the people who actually risk their lives for this country have to fight for basic equipment, housing allowances, and fair wages, but a top official gets another private plane, it's not just bad optics, it's a moral failure. Representative Underwood's questions weren't political theater. They were about accountability, a principle that keeps democracy alive. She wanted to know who authorized this. Was the Coast Guard pressured by higher-ups in the Trump-aligned Department of Homeland Security? Was this part of a political favor or a misuse of defense-related funds for personal comfort? And that's where the Admiral's response, or rather his non-response, becomes telling. He didn't deny it, he didn't confirm it. He pivoted, explaining that the aircraft was part of recapitalization, meaning replacement of outdated equipment. But that's not the issue. The issue is why this was prioritized in the first place, and for whom. Because recapitalization isn't supposed to mean trading away public safety or underfunding personnel to satisfy political vanity projects. Let's not forget, this is happening at a time when the Coast Guard, and every branch of the federal government, is being told to tighten its belt. Essential services are being stretched, programs for housing and healthcare face cuts, and Americans are constantly told there's just not enough money. Yet somehow, for a new luxury jet, there's no hesitation. That's a pattern we've seen again and again. Whether it's lavish security details, private flights, or personal perks, the same political figures who campaign on fiscal conservatism are often the first to misuse public funds for their own convenience. And this is where Democrats like Underwood step in, because oversight isn't optional. It's the backbone of responsible governance. Democrats have long argued that every dollar spent by the government should strengthen public good, from education to defense to healthcare. That's not just ideology, that's ethics. When leaders treat public money as their own wallet, democracy erodes. The line between service and self-interest blurs. What Underwood did was remind the nation that the budget is not just numbers on paper, it's a reflection of priorities. If you're funding jets for cabinet secretaries but cutting grants for Coast Guard families, you're sending a clear message about who matters. Think about this. The Admiral confirmed that the Coast Guard had to divert missions from the Indo-Pacific, the Arctic, and other regions just to cover operations at the southern border. Those are not minor adjustments. Those are strategic trade-offs that weaken our long-term readiness. And now, on top of that, we're learning about a multi-million-dollar expenditure for personal travel. It's not just mismanagement, it's short-sightedness, because every unnecessary dollar spent at the top robs those at the bottom of resources they need to serve effectively. Every political indulgence paid for by taxpayers undermines the very trust that allows government to function. And that's the deeper message behind this hearing. It's not about one plane. It's about the values that guide decision-making in Washington. It's about who gets to benefit when budgets are written behind closed doors. Underwood's line of questioning was a defense of those who don't have a seat at that table, the rank-and-file service members, the Coast Guard families, and yes, the American taxpayers who fund every dollar of these decisions. It's a reminder that democracy demands transparency, even and especially from those in power who'd rather avoid it. And when Admiral Fagan avoided answering whether he'd been instructed to make this purchase, that silence said it all. It told us that accountability still meets resistance, even within institutions sworn to uphold it. It told us that political influence may be steering decisions that should be purely operational. But most importantly, it reminded us why these hearings exist in the first place, to make sure no one, not even the Secretary of Homeland Security, can quietly slip a $50 million luxury jet into a military budget and expect no one to notice. So when you hear Democrats demand oversight, when they insist on questioning every unexplained expenditure, every backroom deal, every reallocation that benefits the few over the many, this is why. It's not obstruction, it's protection. It's about defending the public trust that holds our democracy together. And that's why voices like Rep. Underwood's matter, because leadership isn't about status or privilege, it's about service, genuine, accountable, transparent service to the people. So as we think about what we've seen today, let's remember that government only works when it works for everyone, when it funds safety before status, integrity before indulgence, service before self. If you care about accountability, if you care about a government that answers to the people and not to political elites, then stay informed, stay engaged, and don't look away from moments like this. Because democracy doesn't crumble all at once. It fades when silence replaces scrutiny. And today, thanks to oversight leaders like Lauren Underwood, that silence was broken. If you want to see more analysis like this, stories that cut through the spin and hold power to account, subscribe to Blue Lens, because understanding what's happening behind the headlines isn't just awareness, it's action, and action is how democracy survives.